Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Fun with Robotics. As I mentioned last time, this week would be the first appearance of an actual robot on Fun with Robotics. So I'll be powering up my Astromech droid R2-D2 for this episode. R2-D2 is an actual working version of the droids you see from the Star Wars films, such as R2-D2. And I have to say, I would never have been able to build this droid without the help of the R2-D2 Builders Group. The R2 Builders Group is a group of incredibly talented and helpful people if you're interested in building your own version of R2-D2 or any of the other Astromech droids from the Star Wars films. If you are interested, you can get all the information you need from the website astromech.net. So there is quite a few different ways to construct a droid. There's also a variety of materials that you can use to build your droids. Some are lighter than others, but in my case, I chose to build my droid mostly out of aluminum. And even though aluminum is a fairly light metal, if you put enough of it together in one spot on one droid, it can get pretty heavy. And if you build a heavy droid, then you better have a good mechanism to transport that droid if you're going to take it to events. So today what I'm going to do is demonstrate the transportation crate that I built to take my droid to events. I'll also be demonstrating how I use that crate to get it in and out of my vehicle. So let's have a look at the crate. So here is the droid and the transportation crate. And the first thing I want to point out is that in order for the crate to function, the droid has to be in what's known as a two-legged mode, like he is right now, standing on these two legs straight up and down. This droid is actually known as a 2-3-2 droid, which means it will transition from a two-legged mode, like it is right now, into a three-legged mode, where there's a leg in the center body that extends down, and then the body rotates with respect to the leg to form a tripod. This is inherently more stable when driving the droid around. So when I'm taking it to conventions, I take it in the crate in two-legged mode, and then when I get it to the convention to drive it around, I transition it into a three-legged mode droid. Now, it's not going to fall over. I can actually push this droid in two-legged mode. It's fairly stable. However, the motors are pretty powerful in the feet. If I give it too much power too quickly, there is a chance that it could topple over. And I really don't want that to happen. So when I'm driving it, it's always in three-legged mode. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reposition the droid and the crate, and I'll show you how I actually mesh the two together for transport. And then once they're together, and I put the straps on the front of the droid to make sure he stays in the crate, I'll put the dolly on the back side and show you how I use that to actually move the entire crate. Before I do that, let me just say a few things about the crate. First off, it's built out of 3/4 inch plywood. It's simply screwed together. There's really not much to the structure other than the top, the two sides, and the back. And down here, I've got three, I'll call them ribs, that sort of cradle the back of the droid. And the curved section has some of that pipe insulation just to give it a little bit of extra cushion. Down here also I've got a couple of pieces of plywood that have an angle to them that fit the angle to the back of the foot shell. So those are supported when the droid actually is put into the crate. Now, in order to move the crate around the droid, I have casters in the back and in the front here, and they just barely keep the crate above the ground enough so that I can roll it. All I need to do is give it a little bit of a tilt up, and then I can just drag it forward, and it goes right underneath the foot shells of the droid. The foot shells are only about 3/4 of an inch off the ground, so there's really not much clearance there. So this bottom board here has to slip underneath the sides of the foot shells. And since there is so little clearance, I actually had to route out a little bit of this 1/2-inch plywood so that it would fit underneath those foot shells. However, once I did that, it seemed to work quite nicely. I did have one issue here where I had to cut out a little bit more material because the sprocket on the chain drive actually is a little bit lower than the outside of the foot shell. So it confused me the first couple of times I put the droid in the crate why the bottom wouldn't fit under there. But it turned out that the sprocket for the drive system was just hanging a little bit lower. So once I cut this section out, it fit in nicely. There's also some stabilizer bars that once it's set in my car, I can extend them down and it keeps the crate from rocking. It's difficult to show them to you right now, but once I get it into the car, I'll show you how they work. So I've lined up the droid with the opening of the crate. And at the bottom, there is almost no clearance whatsoever between the inside wall of the crate and the outer edge of the foot shell. So it has to be almost perfectly aligned. Once you do that, you simply give a little bit of lift here, and then the crate just sort of slides right around the droid. And that's it. Now I'll put the straps on and then add the dolly. There are some eye bolts here that these hooks go on, and then it just simply tightens up. That's it. Now he's locked inside the crate. Next, I have to put the dolly on here. And on the back, there are 2 sets of bolts that will keep the dolly attached to the back of the crate. All I have to do is give it a little push so I can slip that under there. And put this little plate over those 2 bolts and put some wing nuts on. Up. Now the one drawback is that to get the droid in and out of the crate, I have to take the dolly off because it tends to tip the whole crate forward. And once I do that, I can't move the crate in and out. So when I go to take them out, I've got to take the dolly off, and then I can just back the crate out at a perfectly flat angle with the floor. Once everything is strapped in and the dolly is attached to the back, all I have to do is tilt this back and roll them out the door. So to roll up the droid into my vehicle, I've got these two ramps, and they're nothing more than two 2x10s. And on the side, I've got just a piece of 1x material that keeps the wheels from rolling off the edge of the ramps on either side. Also, I've added a couple of blocks underneath this top end to bring the surface of the top of the ramp right to the back of the top of the deck in my vehicle. So that just sits right on my bumper. And then on the end, I've made a long taper cut just to come down to the surface of the ground and make it easy to get the wheels up onto the ramp. I've also added a little safety feature here. It's just a clip-on rope with a couple of eye bolts here, and that just keeps these ramps nice and tight to the back of the vehicle, so I don't have to worry about it slipping off. And also, when I'm transporting the droid, I put these on the top rack, and I've got two eye bolts here and here, right where the racks go, and I use bungee cords to tie these two ramps to the top of the vehicle. So this is the part that takes the most effort. And wherever you're parked, if you can find a little bit of an angle to the ground, it's best to park pointing downhill. Just that little bit of angle really makes a difference when trying to push the droid up into the car. So here we go. Make sure I'm lined up. And that's it. So now I'll show you how the stabilizer bars work. Basically just loosen these wing nuts on the side here. Pull the bar down. See that? And then just tighten them back up. And that keeps it from rocking back and forth when the car is moving. Because just pivoting on this, it would tend to rock back and forth. But with these bars, it's very stable. So here's a shot of the ramps mounted on the top rack of my car, and they are mounted there simply with 4 heavy-duty bungee cords. Now, one thing I do is I reverse the direction of the ramps so that the angled cut here that's normally at the back of the car is now pointing forward. And that's simply because I wanted the 2 sideboards to fit together. It seems to make a good friction fit and just kind of holds everything together better. The bungee cords are, like I mentioned, really heavy duty bungee cords, and I think the trick is to be able to stretch them very tightly. I've driven this vehicle more than 80 miles an hour down the highway with just these 4 bungee cords, and it has never moved on me. But I think having the eye bolts here really helps to keep them right over the rack. And there's a shot of how the bungee cords hook into the eye bolts and then loop over the ramps and then underneath the rack of the car. I used to go through a lot more trouble. I used to actually have bolts that go through both of the sideboards to keep everything held together. I also used to tie it down as well as having the bungee cords, but I found it just wasn't necessary. However, the bungee cords over time do tend to wear out. This white one you see here is starting to fray and really needs to be replaced. I replace them every 1.5 to 2 years. So before I do the wrap up of this week's episode, I'd like to point out that in all the videos that I've done so far, they've involved some sort of woodworking to build the organizational carts or the droid transport cart that we saw this week. Wood is one of those universal materials that's easy to work with, it's fairly inexpensive, it's certainly readily available, and even the tools to work with wood can be fairly inexpensive, especially with a resource like Craigslist, where people are selling tools at half or less than the cost of new tools. So I don't care if you're an electronics guy, a mechanical guy, or even a software guy like me. Being able to work with wood really offers you a lot of advantages to build the things that you really want to build. I know that even the R2 builders, a lot of the droids that they make have wooden frames, some have wooden legs, and even a friend of mine built his entire foot drive system out of furniture grade plywood. It's nice and light, it's strong, it's easy to work with, and so you should always keep it in mind as a possible building material when you want to build something. With that said, in next week's episode, I'll show you the inexpensive table saw that I purchased from someone on Craigslist, and I'll show you how I fixed what would be considered a critical flaw in the design of the saw. Also, I'll show you how I've modified it to the point where it has really become one of the jewels of my shop, something that I use on a daily basis and get a lot of use out of. So with that, we'll wrap up episode 6. If you have any questions about the build of the droid transportation cart, you can always send me an email at info@theroboticscodedepot.com, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And don't forget to check out the website, theroboticscodedepot.com, because I'm always posting new stuff there. Until next time, we'll see you later.